The fog clung to Brooklyn docks like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of cranes and the shouts of stevedores. At midnight, beneath a flickering gas lamp, Arthur Langston's body sprawled, a crimson stain blooming across his tailored suit. A dagger protruded from his chest, pinning a note, "Debts are paid." The air reeked of salt and betrayal. Who had lured the banker here? Why this brutal end? Hercule Poirot, summoned from London, surveyed the scene, his mustache twitching. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "this is no ordinary murder." A mystery beckoned, and the docks whispered secrets. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The fog draped Brooklyn docks like a conspirator's shroud, muffling the clatter of cranes and the coarse shouts of stevedores unloading cargo under flickering gas lamps. The air, thick with the tang of salt, oil, and rusted iron, carried a chill that seeped into the bones. It was just past midnight on a damp November night in 1933, and the docks, usually alive with the rhythm of labor, seemed to hold their breath. Beneath a lone gas lamp, its weak halo struggling against the mist, lay the body of Arthur Langston, a titan of New York's financial world. His tailored pinstripe suit, once pristine, was now marred by a crimson stain blooming across his chest, where a dagger protruded, pinning a scrap of paper to his flesh. The note, scrawled in a hurried hand, read, "Debts are paid." The scene was grotesque, theatrical, as if staged for maximum effect. The question hung in the air like the fog itself. Who had lured this wealthy banker to this desolate place? And why had they ended his life so brutally? Hercule Poirot, summoned urgently from London at the behest of a panicked American colleague, stepped onto the rain-slicked pier with the precision of a man who detested disorder. His patent leather shoes gleamed despite the damp, and his neatly pressed overcoat repelled the mist as effectively as his mind repelled chaos. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, muttered complaints about the weather, his umbrella wobbling against the wind. "Really, Poirot," Hastings said, shivering. "Couldn't they—"
Eyes, sharp and gray as polished steel, that Callahan's. "Monsieur Langston was no mere banker, Inspector. His death sends ripples. Hercule Poirot is here to ensure those ripples do not become a flood." Callahan shrugged, leading them to the body. Arthur Langston lay sprawled on the cobblestones, his face frozen in a grimace of surprise. The dagger, a sleek, silver-handled weapon, was embedded deep, suggesting a single forceful blow. The note, now damp with blood and fog, was the only clue left in plain sight. Poirot knelt, careful not to disturb the scene, his gloved fingers hovering over the note without touching it. "Debts are paid," he murmured. "A message, yes. But for whom? The victim, or those who find him?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, frowned. "Sounds personal, Poirot. Someone had a grudge." Poirot nodded, his mind already cataloging details. The angle of the dagger, the absence of defensive wounds, the pristine condition of Langston's cufflinks, save for one, lying a few feet away, glinting faintly in the lamplight. It was gold, monogrammed with VM. A clue or a deliberate misdirection? Callahan filled them in with the efficiency of a man eager to hand off responsibility. Langston, 48, was a pillar of New York's banking elite, his fortune built on shrewd investments and, some whispered, ruthless tactics. He had been found at midnight by a dock worker, one Lionel Drake, who claimed he was stumbling home after a few drinks when he spotted the body. Drake's story was vague. He'd seen a shadow fleeing into the fog but couldn't describe it. "Drunk as a skunk," Callahan muttered. "Not much use." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Inspector, even a drunken witness sees something. We shall speak with this Monsieur Drake." The docks themselves were a labyrinth of crates, barrels, and rusted machinery,
their shapes looming like specters in the mist. Poirot's gaze swept the area, noting the scuff marks in the mud, the faint trail of footprints leading toward a nearby warehouse. "The killer was careless," he said softly, "or wished us to think they were rival or someone else, lurking in the shadows of the docks." As they examined the scene further, Poirot's attention returned to the cufflink. It was finely crafted, the kind a man of means would wear, yet it lay too conveniently apart from the body. "VM," Poirot mused aloud. "Vincent Moretti, perhaps, or another, whose initials we do not yet know." Hastings, ever practical, suggested, "Could have fallen off in a struggle." Poirot shook his head. "No struggle, Hastings. Look at the hands. No bruises, no scratches. Monsieur Langston was taken by surprise." The note, too, intrigued him. The handwriting was bold, almost defiant, as if the killer wanted their message to be read. But why? To boast? To mislead? Or to settle a score only they understood? The wind picked up, carrying the distant wail of a ship's horn. Poirot stood, adjusting his hat with a precise flick. "We must learn more of Monsieur Langston's life," he said. "His enemies, his secrets. A man does not die in such a place without reason." Callahan mentioned a third figure, Clara Henshaw, Langston's private secretary, who reportedly knew too much about his affairs. Rumors swirled of an inappropriate closeness between them, though Callahan dismissed it as gossip. Poirot, however, never dismissed gossip. The smallest whisper, Inspector, can lead to the loudest truth. As they prepared to leave, a shout broke the eerie quiet. A dock worker, his face pale beneath a cap pulled low, ran toward them. "Found something strange in the warehouse," he called, pointing to a looming structure nearby. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Eh bien," he said, "the docks begin to speak. Let us listen." He strode toward the warehouse, Hastings and Callahan trailing, the fog swirling thicker around them. What lay inside? Another clue or a trap? The mystery of Arthur Langston's death was only beginning to unfold, and Poirot sensed the threads of a deeper conspiracy tightening around them. The warehouse loomed, its iron doors creaking in the wind. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of tar and damp wood. Crates were stacked high. "Assumptions are the enemy of truth." He pocketed the page, careful to use his handkerchief, and turned to Jenkins. "Who else has access to this warehouse?" Jenkins shrugged, nervous. "Lots of folks. Workers, foremen, even Langston himself came by sometimes." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Langston? Here? At night?" Jenkins nodded. "Saw him a week ago, talking to some fella in a fancy coat. Didn't look happy." The revelation added a new layer to the puzzle. Why would a banker frequent the docks, a place so far removed from his gilded world? Poirot's mind raced, connecting dots. The cufflink, the note, the ledger, the shadowy figure Jenkins described. Each clue was a piece, but the picture remained incomplete. He turned to Callahan. "Inspector, I require a list of all who worked this dock tonight, and any visitors Langston received in the past month." Callahan nodded, though his expression suggested he found Poirot's meticulousness excessive. "And," Poirot added, "we must visit Madame Langston at once. The widow's grief, or lack thereof, will tell us much." As they exited the warehouse, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping the docks in an impenetrable veil. Hastings shivered again, not just from the cold. "This place gives me the creeps, Poirot. Feels like we're being watched." Poirot paused, his head tilted as if listening to the silence. "Perhaps we are, Hastings. Perhaps we are." The shout from Jenkins still echoed in his mind. "Found something strange!" Whatever lay ahead, Poirot knew the docks held more secrets, and he would unravel them, one meticulous step at a time. As they stepped back into the fog, a faint clatter echoed from the warehouse, a sound like metal on stone. Poirot froze. "Someone is there," he whispered. "The killer, perhaps, returns to the scene." Chapter 2. The Widow's Tears. The Langston mansion rose from the mist like a monument to opulence, its limestone facade gleaming faintly under the grey dawn of Brooklyn's elite enclave. Hercule Poirot, impeccable chignon. Her face, pale and composed, bore the marks of grief, or so it seemed. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the gesture delicate but calculated, as if rehearsed for an audience. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft yet steady, "I'm grateful you've come. Arthur was my world." Her gaze flickered, meeting Poirot's sharp grey eyes for only a moment before drifting to the fire. Hastings, ever susceptible to feminine charm, offered a sympathetic nod. "Terrible loss, Mrs. Langston. We'll get to the bottom of this." Poirot, however, remained unmoved, his little grey cells already analysing the widow's performance. The tears were present, yes, but the eyes lacked the redness of genuine sorrow. The handkerchief, he noted, was pristine, untouched by actual tears. "Madame," Poirot began, his tone polite yet probing, "your husband's death at the docks. Most unusual, no? A man of his stature, in such a place, at midnight. Can you enlighten us?" Evelyn's lips parted, then closed, as if weighing her words. "Arthur was unpredictable," she said at last. "He often worked late, meeting clients in strange places. He said the docks were discreet for certain transactions." Her hesitation was subtle, but Poirot caught it, like a hunter sensing a rustle in the underbrush. "Transactions?" he pressed, adjusting his gloves with deliberate care. "Of what nature?" Evelyn's eyes darted to a silver cigarette case on the mantel, then back to Poirot. "Business, I presume. Arthur never shared details. He said it protected me." Hastings frowned, scribbling in his notebook. "Protected you from what, exactly?" Evelyn's smile was faint, almost brittle. "From worry, Captain Hastings. A wife's burden is heavy enough." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers clutched the handkerchief a fraction too tightly. Grief or guilt? The distinction was critical, and Poirot was not yet convinced of her innocence. The drawing room, with its velvet drapes and mahogany furniture, Poirot asked. "A man of Monsieur Langston's influence collects enemies as a library collects books." Evelyn hesitated, her fingers brushing the necklace at her throat, a string of pearls, each one gleaming like a tiny moon. "There were whispers," she admitted. "His secretary, Clara Henshaw, knew too much about his affairs. Some said too much." Her tone carried a hint of disdain, and Poirot noted it. Jealousy, perhaps, or a deliberate deflection. Hastings, catching the implication, leaned forward. "You mean an affair?" Evelyn's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Arthur? With Clara? She's a mouse, Captain. But she was always there, hovering, typing his letters, organizing his life. If anyone knew his secrets, it was her." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A scorned wife, a rival banker, a secretive secretary. The threads of the mystery were multiplying, each one a potential snare. The butler reappeared, announcing a tray of tea. As he poured, Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on a mahogany desk in the corner. Papers were neatly stacked, but one item stood out, A leather-bound ledger, its spine worn, a single page protruding slightly. "Madame," Poirot said, gesturing to the desk. "May I?" Evelyn nodded, though her eyes followed him closely. Poirot opened the ledger, his gloved fingers turning pages with care. The entries were meticulous, dates, sums, initials, but several pages were torn out, their jagged edges betraying haste. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "What was removed, and by whom?" Evelyn's voice was cool. "Arthur was private about his work. I never pried." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, whispered, "Looks suspicious, Poirot. Why tear out pages?" Poirot's moustache twitched. A red herring, mon ami? Or a glimpse of the truth? "We shall see." He closed the ledger, his mind cataloguing the anomaly. The torn pages suggested secrets Langston wished to hide.
Langston's study, ma'am, looked upset.
Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. This is most illuminating." The maid curtsied and retreated, leaving a charged silence in her wake. Poirot rose, adjusting his hat. "Madame Langston, we will return. There is much to uncover." Evelyn nodded, her composure restored, but her eyes followed them to the door. As they stepped into the drizzle, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. That ledger, Clara's visit, it's all connected." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The cufflink at the docks, the torn ledger, Clara's late-night visit, Evelyn's too-perfect grief. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. The car rolled back toward the docks, where Poirot intended to question Lionel Drake, the dock worker who had found the body. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the skeletal outlines of cranes against the gray sky. Hastings, still clutching his notebook, mused, "Evelyn's got motive, Poirot. Millions in inheritance. And that Moretti fellow sounds like a thug." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Do not be so quick, Hastings. The obvious motive is often the least true. We must dig deeper, into the shadows of Monsieur Langston's life." As they neared the docks, Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara Henshaw, a secretary who knew too much, seen at the mansion after hours, possibly involved with her employer. Was she a victim of Langston's charm, a conspirator in his schemes, or something else entirely? And the ledger's missing pages, did they hold the key to the murder? Or were they a distraction, like the cufflink marked VM? Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, weaving connections, testing hypotheses. The note, "Debts are paid," suggested a personal vendetta, but the docks hinted at something larger, perhaps a criminal enterprise Langston had stumbled into. The car stopped, and Poirot stepped out, his eyes scanning the docks. The warehouse where Jenkins had found the crate loomed nearby, its iron doors now locked. "We must find Mademoiselle Dancer," his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, clutched his notebook, his face creased with unease. "This place gives me the shivers, Poirot," he muttered, glancing at the looming warehouses. "Blood on the crates, a dead banker. It's like something out of a penny dreadful." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "Mon ami, life is often more dramatic than fiction. But fear not, Hercule Poirot shall bring order to this chaos." Their destination was the office of Vincent Moretti, the rival banker whose name had surfaced in Evelyn Langston's accusations. Moretti's office, a squat brick building nestled between two warehouses, exuded none of the grandeur of the Langston mansion. Its windows were grimy, the air within heavy with cigar smoke, and the faint tang of whiskey. Moretti himself, a bullish man in his late 40s, sat behind a cluttered desk, his broad shoulders straining against a pinstripe suit that seemed a size too small. A jagged scar ran across his left cheek, a memento of some past altercation, and his dark eyes glinted with defiance as Poirot and Hastings entered. "So, you're the fancy detective from London," Moretti said, his voice a gravelly sneer. "Langston's dead and you think I did it. Typical." Poirot, unruffled, adjusted his gloves and took a seat, his posture as composed as if he were in a Mayfair drawing room. "Monsieur Moretti, I think nothing. Yet." Hercule Poirot observes, he listens, he deduces. "You, I understand, had reason to despise Monsieur Langston." Moretti snorted, leaning back in his chair, a cigar smouldering between his fingers. "Despise? Sure. He was a snake. Outmaneuvered me in a merger last year, left my bank in ruins, cost me millions. But kill him? I'm no fool." His gaze darted to the side. A flicker, Poirot noted. The man was defensive, perhaps too much so. Hastings, standing by the door, scribbled in his notebook. "That's motive enough, I'd say," he ventured. Moretti's eyes narrowed. "Motive? Half of New York had motive." Langston didn't get
Desk, betraying unease. Poirot's attention shifted to the desk itself, a chaos of invoices, ledgers, and crumpled notes. One document caught his eye, a letter, half buried under a whiskey glass, bearing Langston's letterhead. "May I?" Poirot asked, gesturing. Moretti shrugged, but his eyes followed Poirot's gloved hand as it lifted the letter. It was a curt demand for payment, dated a month prior, referencing a debt of $50,000. Monsieur Langston was not forgiving in matters of money, Poirot observed. Moretti's laugh was bitter. "He squeezed me dry, but I paid him every cent. Check his books." Poirot's moustache twitched. The ledger in Langston's study with its torn pages suggested otherwise. Was Moretti lying, or unaware of a deeper deception? Leaving the office, Poirot and Hastings returned to the docks, where the air grew colder as the sun dipped low. The shout about fresh blood on the crates had drawn a small crowd of dock workers, their faces grim under wool caps. Inspector Callahan, his coat still damp from the morning's fog, met them near the warehouse. "Found it over here," he said, pointing to a stack of crates marked with faded shipping labels. A smear of blood, still tacky, streaked across the rough wood. Poirot knelt, his handkerchief protecting his fingers as he examined the stain. "Recent," he murmured. "Not Langston's, then. Another crime, perhaps." Callahan shook his head. "Could be a worker's accident. These docks are rough." But Poirot was unconvinced. The blood was deliberate, a trail leading to a crate pried open at the corner. Inside, beneath a layer of straw, were more papers, financial records, much like those in the warehouse from the previous night. These, however, bore Moretti's signature, alongside Langston's, detailing transactions for shipments never recorded officially. "Smuggling, perhaps?" Hastings suggested, his voice low. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Or fraud. These papers suggest a partnership, mon ami, one that ended in betrayal. The blood, the papers, the cufflink, all pointed to a web of deceit. But who had spun it? The dock workers lingering nearby." Drake shrugged, but his gaze darted to the warehouse. "Couldn't say. Fog was thick." Poirot's little gray cells hummed. Drake's story was too vague, his hostility too pronounced. Was he protecting someone, or himself? As Callahan questioned the other workers, Poirot's attention returned to the crate. The blood smear was deliberate, a marker perhaps to draw attention. But why? To incriminate Drake, or to distract from another clue? Poirot's gaze swept the dock, landing on a glint in the mud, a key, small and brass, engraved with A.L. He retrieved it with his handkerchief, holding it to the light. "Langston's?" Hastings asked. Poirot nodded. "Perhaps." or another piece of the puzzle, placed to mislead. The key's purpose was unclear, but its presence suggested a lock waiting to be opened, literal or metaphorical. Back at Moretti's office, Poirot requested a list of his recent dealings with Langston. Moretti, grudgingly, produced a ledger, but several pages were missing, much like those in Langston's study. "Sloppy bookkeeping," Moretti muttered, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. The coincidence was too stark. "Monsieur, you claim to have paid your debt to Langston, yet the records are incomplete. Why?" Moretti's scar twitched again. "Ask his secretary, Clara Henshaw. She handled his books. Probably knows more than she lets on." The mention of Clara reignited Poirot's curiosity. The maid's revelation that Clara had been at the mansion after hours suggested a deeper involvement. Was she a pawn, a conspirator, or a victim of Langston's schemes? Poirot's mind raced, weaving connections. The cufflink, possibly Moretti's. The torn ledgers, hiding financial secrets. The key, a potential link to the warehouse. And now, fresh blood, hinting at a second crime. The docks were a stage, and the players, Evelyn, Moretti, Clara, Drake, were all hiding their scripts. As the sun sank, casting long shadows across the docks, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave. Callahan promised to verify Moretti's alibi and track down Drake for further questioning. But Poirot's thoughts were elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of the mystery. The note, debts, woman, Clara Henshaw, standing too close. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The plot thickens, Hastings. The docs have more to tell." Chapter 4. The Secretary's Secret. The late afternoon light filtered through the grimy windows of a small Brooklyn cafe, casting a muted glow over checkered tablecloths and chipped porcelain cups. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat draped neatly over a chair, sat with the precision of a man who arranged his world as meticulously as his moustache. Across from him, Clara Henshaw, Arthur Langston's private secretary, clutched a teacup with trembling hands. Her prim grey dress and tightly pinned hair suggested a woman of order, but her eyes, wide, darting, shadowed with fatigue, betrayed turmoil. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, scribbled in his notebook, his brow furrowed. "This case is getting murkier by the minute, Poirot," he whispered. "Blood? Keys? Photographs? What next?" Poirot's grey eyes gleamed, his voice low. "Patience, mon ami. The truth hides in the shadows, but Hercule Poirot shall bring it to light." Clara Henshaw's presence was no accident. Poirot had tracked her to this cafe after the maid's revelation that she had been at the Langston mansion after hours, and the dock worker's discovery of the torn photograph depicting her with Arthur Langston. The image, half burned and crumpled, showed a closeness that suggested more than a professional relationship. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with questions. Was Clara a scorned lover? A conspirator in Langston's schemes? Or a pawn caught in a deadly game? Her nervous demeanour as she sipped her tea suggested she carried secrets heavier than the porcelain in her hands. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot began, his tone gentle yet probing. "You were seen at the Langston mansion last night, long after the usual hours. Pourquoi? What business brought you there?" Clara's cup clattered against its saucer, her cheeks flushing. I was delivering papers," she stammered. "Arthur, Mr. Langston asked me to drop them off. He was particular about his files." Her mouth. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "It's not what you think." Her voice trembled, but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Then enlighten me, mademoiselle. A man is dead, a dagger in his chest, and you, it seems, were among the last to see him. Speak, or the police may draw their own conclusions." Clara's eyes welled with tears, but she held them back, her jaw tightening. "I only typed his letters, kept his books,
she insisted. He trusted me. That's all. Poirot's little gray cells hummed. The maid's testimony, the photograph, and now Clara's evasions painted a picture of a woman entangled in Langston's world, perhaps too deeply. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft as silk but sharp as steel, a witness places you near the docks last night, clutching a parcel. What was in it, mademoiselle? And why were you there, so close to the scene of murder? Clara's face drained of color, her hands shaking so violently that tea splashed onto the tablecloth. I wasn't at the docks, she said, her voice barely audible. You've got it wrong. Hastings, sensing her distress, softened his tone. Miss Henshaw, if you're in trouble, tell us. We can help. But Poirot's eyes remained fixed on her, unyielding. He had seen fear before, and Clara's was genuine. But was it fear of discovery, or of something more sinister? Mademoiselle, he said, leaning forward, a note was found with the body. Debts are paid. Did you write it, or do you know who did? Clara shook her head vehemently, her voice rising. I didn't write anything. I didn't kill him. Her outburst drew glances from nearby patrons, and she shrank back, her composure crumbling. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together fragments. The cufflink marked VM, the torn ledger pages, the key engraved with AL, the blood-smeared crate, and now the photograph, all suggested a conspiracy, but its shape remained elusive. Clara's denial of being at the docks contradicted the dock worker's testimony, and her presence at the mansion raised questions. Had she delivered papers, as she claimed, or exchanged a glance with Hastings, who looked torn between pity and suspicion? She's hiding something, Poirot, Hastings whispered as Clara dabbed her eyes. That photograph, it's damning. Poirot nodded, his mind already elsewhere. The photograph found by Lionel Drake suggested a personal connection between Clara and Langston. But was it love, blackmail, or a calculated ruse? And the letter, if not Clara's, whose? Evelyn Langston's composure, Vincent Moretti's defiance, and now Clara's fear formed a triangle of motives, each pointing to the other. Leaving the cafe, Poirot and Hastings stepped into the gathering dusk, the air sharp with the scent of rain. The docks were a short walk away, and Poirot intended to revisit the crime scene, where the blood on the crate and the key marked AL awaited further scrutiny. As they walked, Hastings mused, Clara's story doesn't add up. She's too nervous, too evasive. And that photograph, Langston was married, for heaven's sake. Poirot's cane tapped rhythmically. Indeed, mon ami. But the heart is a poor judge of propriety. If Mademoiselle Henshaw loved Langston, her despair may be genuine, or it may be a performance to rival Madame Langston's. At the docks, Inspector Callahan met them, his face grim. Got a lead on that blood, he said. One of the workers saw a woman near the warehouse last night, screaming. Didn't get a good look, but she was carrying something, maybe a parcel. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A woman, you say? Near the time of the murder? Callahan nodded. Could be your secretary, or someone else. Poirot's mind flashed to Evelyn Langston, whose alibi at the gala was yet unverified. Could she have slipped away? Or was Clara, despite her denials, the woman in question? The warehouse loomed ahead, its iron doors now guarded by a policeman. Inside, the crate with the blood smear stood untouched, its contents still a mystery. Poirot examined the financial documents again, noting discrepancies in the signatures. Some bore Langston's initials, others Moretti's, and a few were marked C.H. Clara Henshaw? These papers, Poirot said, settling into evening. The cranes silent, the workers gone. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the horizon. See, the docks are a stage, Hastings, he said softly, and the players, Evelyn, Moretti, Clara, Drake, are all hiding their roles. But Poirot shall uncover them. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed unease. The scream reported by the dock worker echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder that danger lingered. As they turned to leave, a dock worker's shout cut through the dusk. "Found a scarf near the crate! Smells like perfume!" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his cane freezing mid-step. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "It's a woman's scream. It's a scarf. Our killer leaves breadcrumbs. But for whom?"
Chapter 5. The Dock Worker's Tale.
The Brooklyn docks, shrouded in the lengthening shadows of a November evening in 1933, seemed to pulse with secrets, each creak of the cranes and lap of the tide whispering clues to those who listened. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat a stark contrast to the grime around him, stood near the warehouse where Arthur Langston's body had been found. His patent leather shoes gleamed under the faint glow of a gas lamp, and his cane tapped a deliberate rhythm on the cobblestones. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal shadow, shivered beside him, clutching his notebook. "This place feels cursed, Poirot," he muttered, glancing at the blood-smeared crate nearby. "A scarf? A scream? A key? What's next? A ghost?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a flicker of amusement in his sharp gray eyes. "Mon ami, there are no ghosts here, only truths hiding in plain sight. Hercule Poirot shall find them." Their focus had shifted to Lionel Drake, the burly dock worker who had discovered Langston's body and whose hostility had piqued Poirot's curiosity. Drake, with his weathered face and calloused hands, stood a few yards away, leaning against a crate with a scowl that could curdle milk. The scarf, found moments ago by another worker, lay in Poirot's gloved hands, a delicate silk thing, scented with jasmine, utterly out of place among the dock's rough edges. "This," Poirot said, holding it aloft, "belongs to a woman of refinement. Yet it is here, near blood and murder. Most intriguing." Hastings frowned. "Clara Henshaw? Or Mrs. Langston?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Or another, mon ami? We must not assume." Drake's voice cut through the dusk, gruff and defiant. "You're wasting your time, detective. I told the cops what I saw. A shadow, nothing more." His fists clenched, the dirt under his nails stark against his skin. Poirot approached, his posture calm, but his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Drake, you found Monsieur Langston's body, yet your story is vague. A shadow, you say, but shadows have shapes. A man? A woman?"
Tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted to the warehouse. "And this key," Poirot said, producing it with a flourish, "engraved with A.L. You dropped it, did you not?" Drake's face flushed, a mix of anger and surprise. "Ain't mine," he snapped. "Never seen it before." But his fingers twitched, betraying unease. Hastings, scribbling furiously, whispered, "He's lying, Poirot. He's got to be involved." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps, mon ami, but lies are like footprints. They lead somewhere." He turned to the crate, where the blood smear had dried to a rusty brown. The financial documents inside, bearing Langston's and Moretti's signatures, hinted at fraud or smuggling, but one page stood out, marked with C.H. Clara Henshaw, perhaps? Poirot's mind raced, connecting dots. The cufflink, the torn ledger from Langston's study, the jasmine-scented scarf, the scream reported near the docks. Each clue was a thread, but the tapestry remained elusive. Poirot gestured to the key. "This, Monsieur Drake, unlocks something, perhaps a crate, a safe, or a secret. Shall we test it?" He approached a nearby crate, its lock rusted but intact. The key slid in smoothly, turning with a satisfying click. Inside were more documents, bonds, meticulously forged, worth millions. Hastings gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot, this is a fortune! Langston was up to his neck in it. Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the papers. Indeed. And someone wished these bonds to remain hidden or to be found. Drake shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the crate. "Don't know nothing about that," he muttered. But Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "You spoke of your brother, monsieur. How did Langston ruin him?" Drake's face darkened, his voice low. "Langston cut wages last year. My brother Tom couldn't pay his debts, drank himself to death. Langston didn't care, called it business." The bitterness in his tone was palpable, a motive as clear as the blood on the crate. Yet Poirot sensed more. Drake's anger was raw. But was it heard the scream? Did they describe the woman? Callahan shook his head. "Just said she was in a hurry, carrying something. Couldn't see her face." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A parcel, perhaps? Like the one Mademoiselle Henshaw was seen with?" Hastings, catching the thread, leaned in. "You think Clara's mixed up in this, Poirot?" "That photograph. She and Langston were close." Poirot nodded, his mind weaving connections. The photograph found by Drake showed Clara and Langston in a moment of intimacy. But was it evidence of love, blackmail, or a deliberate misdirection? And the bonds, were they the debts referenced in the note pinned to Langston's body? "Says the note," Poirot murmured. "Debts are paid. It is personal. Yet the bonds suggest greed. We must untangle this knot." Poirot turned back to Drake, his voice soft but commanding. "Monsieur, you know more than you say. The shadow you saw, who was it? Speak, or the police may assume the worst." Drake's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the warehouse. "I told you I didn't see it clear. Just a figure, moving fast." But his voice faltered, and Poirot sensed a crack in his armor. "And this figure," Poirot pressed, "did they carry a parcel, or perhaps a dagger?" Drake's silence was answer enough. As Callahan took Drake for further questioning, Poirot and Hastings examined the bonds again. The forgeries were masterful, the signatures convincing, but the CH initials suggested Clara's involvement, or someone framing her. "If Clara was part of this," Hastings said, "she's in deep. But why run to the docks?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps to deliver or to destroy. The scarf, the scream, the parcel, all suggest a woman's hand. But whose?" The docks were now cloaked in darkness, the gas lamps struggling against the night. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, his mind cataloging every detail. The cufflink, possibly Vincent Moretti's. The torn ledger pages, hiding financial secrets. The key, unlocking a fortune in forged bonds. The scarf, scented with jasmine. The photograph, hinting at Clara's connection to Langston. Each clue was a piece of the night. "There's something in the water. Looks like a body." Poirot's cane froze, his eyes narrowing. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "Another victim? Or another clue? The docks demand our attention." Chapter 6. The Second Victim. The Brooklyn docks, cloaked in the inky darkness of a November night in 1933, seemed to breathe with a malevolent life. The lapping of the harbor's black waters, mingling with the distant clatter of cranes. Hercule Poirot, his silhouette sharp against the flickering gas lamps, stood at the water's edge, his patent leather shoes inches from the tide. His overcoat, pristine despite the damp, repelled the chill as effectively as his mind repelled disorder. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, clutched his notebook, his face pale under the brim of his hat. "Another body, Poirot," he whispered, his voice trembling. "This is getting out of hand." Poirot's moustache twitched, his grey eyes gleaming with intensity. "Mon ami, it is precisely in chaos that Hercule Poirot finds clarity. Let us see what the docks reveal."
The dock workers' shout had drawn a small crowd, their lanterns casting wavering light across the harbour. Inspector Callahan, his coat soaked from the evening's drizzle, directed 2 policemen to retrieve the body from the water. It was Tom Riley, a wiry dock worker known for his quick temper and quicker fists. His lifeless form, tangled in a fishing net, was hauled onto the pier, his clothes sodden and his pockets stuffed with papers, counterfeit bonds, identical to those found in the warehouse crate. Poirot knelt, his handkerchief protecting his fingers as he examined the body. "Drowned, perhaps," he murmured, "but the bonds suggest otherwise. This is no accident, Inspector." Callahan's face was grim, his voice rough. Riley was trouble, fought with everyone, including Lionel Drake. Could be a brawl gone wrong. But Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the bruising around Riley's throat. Too precise for a mere brawl. Strangled, then cast into the water.
The players are growing desperate. Poirot and Hastings returned to the Langston mansion to confront Evelyn, whose too perfect grief had raised Poirot's suspicions. The drawing room, warmed by a roaring fire, felt stifling compared to the dock's chill. Evelyn, still in black silk, rose to greet them, her composure faltering at the news of Riley's death. "Another murder," she whispered, sinking into a chair, her hand clutching her pearls. "What is happening?" Her voice trembled, but Poirot noted her quick recovery, her eyes dry despite the theatrics. "Madame," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "Tom Riley was connected to your husband's business. Did you know him?" Evelyn's gaze flickered to the fire, her fingers tightening on her necklace. "A dock worker? No, Arthur dealt with such people, not I." Her denial was swift, but Poirot caught the hesitation, the slight tremor in her voice. "And yet," he pressed, "your husband's dealings at the docks were frequent. These bonds, forged, valuable, suggest a scheme. Were you aware of his irregularities?" Evelyn's lips parted, then closed, her composure a fragile mask. "Arthur kept his business private," she said. "I trusted him." But her eyes betrayed calculation, and Poirot's suspicions deepened. Was she shielding her husband's legacy, or her own involvement? Hastings, less tactful, leaned forward. "Mrs. Langston, those bonds point to fraud. If you knew anything, now's the time to say." Evelyn's smile was brittle, her voice sharp. "Captain, I am a widow, not a criminal. If Arthur was involved in unsavory dealings, I was ignorant." Poirot's moustache twitched. Ignorance, he knew, could be a convenient cloak. He produced the jasmine-scented scarf, holding it delicately. "This was found near the murder scene, madame. Its perfume is distinctive. Yours, perhaps?" Evelyn's face paled, but she shook her head. "I don't wear jasmine. Perhaps Clara's. She was always at Arthur's side." The mention of Clara Henshaw reignited Poirot's focus. Documents suggested involvement, willing or coerced. "And the scarf?" Poirot said, producing it. "Is it yours?" Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, not mine. I don't wear perfume." Her denial matched Evelyn's, leaving Poirot with a puzzle. Whose scarf, and why was it left at the scene? Returning to the docks, Poirot sought Vincent Moretti, whose office was now a hive of activity as police searched for evidence. Moretti, his scar livid in the lamplight, laughed off Riley's death. "Dock rats like him die all the time," he sneered. "No loss." But Poirot noted his unease, the way his hands fidgeted with a pen. "Monsieur Moretti," Poirot said, "these bonds bear your signature. Were you and Langston partners in this fraud?" Moretti's eyes flashed. "I paid my debts to Langston. If he was forging bonds, that's on him." But the missing ledger pages, mirroring those in Langston's study, suggested otherwise. Poirot's mind churned, weaving connections. The cufflink, possibly Moretti's, planted to mislead. The key, unlocking a crate of forged bonds. The scarf, a woman's touch in a man's world. The photograph, hinting at Clara's heartbreak. And now Riley, a second victim, strangled and discarded. The note, "Debts are paid," suggested vengeance, but the bonds pointed to greed. Were the murders a settling of personal scores, or a cover for a larger scheme? Poirot's little grey cells worked furiously, testing hypotheses, discarding red herrings. Lionel Drake, summoned again, was nowhere to be found. Callahan reported he had vanished after their last encounter, his absence raising suspicions. "Drake and Riley fought often," Callahan said. "Maybe Drake silenced him." Poirot nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Drake's vendetta against Langston was clear, but his role in Riley's death was uncertain. Was he a killer, or another pawn in a cleverer game? As the night deepened, the docks grew silent, the gas lamps casting eerie halos. Poirot stood by the water, the scarf in his hand, its jasmine scent faint but persistent. "This," he said to Hastings, "is no mere..." Eyes narrowing. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "The hunter becomes the hunted. Let us find him before the killer does." Chapter 7. The Hidden Ledger. The Brooklyn docks, now swallowed by the velvet darkness of a November night in 1933, seemed to hold their breath, as if the very air conspired to conceal the secrets of Arthur Langston's murder. Hercule Poirot, his silhouette sharp under the flickering gas lamps, moved with the precision of a chess master, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the cobblestone pier. Captain Hastings, trailing behind, clutched his notebook, his face etched with unease. "This case is a labyrinth, Poirot," he muttered, glancing at the looming warehouses. "Drake's vanished, Riley's dead, and that scarf, someone's playing games." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray eyes gleaming with resolve. "Mon ami, games have rules, and Hercule Poirot is adept at finding them. The docks whisper, and we shall listen." The shout of a dock worker had sent them racing toward an old warehouse, where Lionel Drake, the embittered dock worker who had found Langston's body, was reportedly hiding. But the warehouse, its iron doors rusted and ajar, was empty, save for the faint scent of tar and a scattering of crates. Poirot's disappointment was fleeting. His little gray cells were already turning to the next lead, the Langston mansion, where a hidden ledger might hold the key to the conspiracy unraveling before them. "We must return to the mansion," Poirot said, his voice firm. "The answers lie in Monsieur Langston's secrets, and secrets, mon ami, are often written down." The Langston mansion, bathed in the soft glow of electric chandeliers, stood in stark contrast to the dock's grim desolation. The marble floors gleamed, and the air carried the faint scent of polished wood and roses. Evelyn Langston, summoned from her chambers, greeted them in the drawing room, her black silk dress a study in mourning elegance. Her composure, however, was fraying, her eyes darting as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Another visit, Monsieur Poirot?" she said, her voice cool but strained. "Have you found my husband's killer?" Poirot pointed to a panel behind the desk, slightly ajar. "Look, Poirot, something's hidden there." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he pressed the panel, revealing a concealed compartment. Inside was a second ledger, its leather cover worn but intact. Unlike the one on the desk, this ledger was complete, its pages filled with meticulous entries, dates, sums, initials. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Eh bien?"
A hidden treasure, he murmured, flipping through the pages. The entries detailed transactions, large sums, marked with initials VM, CH, and others unfamiliar. The sums were staggering, tied to the forged bonds found in the warehouse and on Tom Riley's body. "Look at this, Poirot," Hastings said, pointing to an entry marked CH, $100,000, dated a week before Langston's death. "Clara Henshaw?" Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Perhaps, mon ami, or another with those initials. This ledger is the heart of the conspiracy." The entries suggested a network of payments, possibly bribes or payoffs, linked to the counterfeit bonds. But why hide the ledger? And who had torn pages from the other? Poirot's little gray cells hummed, weaving connections. The cufflink marked VM, the key marked AL, the jasmine-scented scarf, the photograph of Clara with Langston, Riley's murder, and now this ledger, a map of deceit. Evelyn, watching from the doorway, grew pale. "What is that?" she asked, her voice sharp. Poirot turned, his gaze piercing. "A record of your husband's secrets, madame. Did you know of these transactions?" Evelyn's hand trembled, her composure cracking. "I told you I knew nothing of his business." But her eyes betrayed her, darting to the ledger as if it might burn her. Poirot pressed further. "And these initials, CH, Clara Henshaw, perhaps? She was close to your husband, no?" Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "Clara, a mouse, nothing more. If she was involved, it was her own doing." Poirot's mind flashed to Clara's tearful denials in the café, her admission of affection for Langston, her
"You're innocent, Miss Henshaw. Tell us everything," he urged. Clara's voice broke as she spoke. "Arthur was kind to me. He said the accounts were for discreet clients, that I shouldn't ask questions. I trusted him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And these clients, did they include Vincent Moretti?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes, but Arthur never told me details." Her fear seemed genuine, but Poirot reserved judgment. The ledger, the photograph, the scarf, all pointed to Clara's entanglement, but the extent of her role was unclear. Next, they tracked Vincent Moretti to his office, where the air still reeked of cigar smoke. Moretti, his scar livid in the lamplight, scoffed at the ledger. "Langston's dirty deals? Not my problem," he said, his voice a growl. "I paid what I owed him." But Poirot noted the initials VM in the ledger, tied to sums matching the forged bonds. "Monsieur," Poirot said, his tone sharp, "your signature is here, beside fraudulent transactions. Were you partners or enemies?" Moretti's eyes flashed. "Enemies. He ruined me, but I didn't kill him. Check with Clara. She knew his secrets." The mention of Clara circled back to the docks, where Poirot sought Lionel Drake, still missing since his reported sighting. Inspector Callahan, joining them, had news. Drake's brother, Tom Riley, was in on Langston's schemes. Found a note in Riley's bunk, saying he knew too much. Poirot's mustache twitched. Riley, the second victim, was silenced, perhaps by Drake. But why? Callahan shrugged. Bad blood. Drake blamed Langston for his brother's ruin. But maybe Riley was part of it. The docks, now silent save for the tide's murmur, felt like a chessboard. Each clue a piece in a deadly game. Poirot's mind churned, connecting dots. The cufflink, possibly Moretti's. The key, unlocking forged bonds. The scarf, linked to a woman's scream. The photograph, suggesting Clara's intimacy. Riley, but it hides behind lies. The ledger clutched under his arm felt heavier, its secrets a burden and a beacon. As they turned to leave, a crackle of flames erupted nearby, a fire roaring in Moretti's office, consuming papers and records. Poirot's cane froze, his eyes narrowing. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "The killer burns the evidence. But Poirot's little gray cells do not burn." The Burning Truth. The Brooklyn docks, cloaked in the oppressive darkness of a November night in 1933, pulsed with an undercurrent of danger, the air thick with the acrid scent of smoke. Flames licked the windows of Vincent Moretti's office, a squat brick building nestled among the warehouses, casting an eerie glow across the cobblestone pier. Hercule Poirot, his silhouette sharp against the flickering firelight, stood motionless, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the chaos. His cane, planted firmly on the ground, was a silent declaration of resolve. Captain Hastings, at his side, clutched his notebook, his face pale with alarm. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's arson!" he exclaimed, shielding his eyes from the heat. "Someone's destroying evidence." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray eyes gleaming with intensity. "Mon ami, the fire seeks to hide the truth, but Hercule Poirot shall pluck it from the ashes." Dockworkers scrambled, shouting for buckets and hoses, but the fire roared with a ferocity that suggested petrol, its flames consuming papers and furniture with ruthless efficiency. Inspector Callahan, his coat singed from a futile attempt to enter, joined them, his voice rough. "It's no accident," he growled. "Someone wants Moretti's records gone." Poirot's gaze swept the scene, noting the crowd of onlookers, dockworkers, policemen, and a few curious passers-by. Was the arsonist among them, watching their handiwork? "Inspector," Poirot said, his tone calm but commanding, "retrieve what you can. Even ashes speak to those who listen." As the fire was subdued, leaving the office a smoldering husk, Poirot and Hastings ventured inside. In the warehouse and on Tom Riley's body, the initials VM and CH appeared again, alongside a new set, EL. Evelyn Langston? The threads of the conspiracy were tightening, but the arson suggested desperation, a killer scrambling to cover their tracks. "The fire," Poirot said, "is a confession of guilt, mon ami. But whose?" They sought Moretti, who stood outside, his scar livid in the firelight, his expression a mix of rage and panic. "This is sabotage!" he bellowed, shaking a fist at the crowd. "Someone's out to ruin me!" Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Monsieur Moretti, your office burns, your records with it. Yet this," he held up the singed manifest, "survives. It ties you to Langston's fraud. Speak, or the flames will not be your only reckoning." Moretti's eyes darted, his bravado faltering. "I told you I paid Langston what I owed. If he was forging bonds, I didn't know." But his voice trembled, and Poirot noted the sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. Hastings, less patient, pressed forward. "Your initials are all over those papers, Moretti. You were in on it, weren't you?" Moretti's scar twitched, his hands clenching. "You've got nothing on me. Langston was the crook. Ask his wife, or that secretary of his. They knew everything." Poirot's little grey cells hummed. Moretti's deflection to Evelyn and Clara was predictable, but the initials EL on the manifest suggested a deeper connection. Was Evelyn more than a grieving widow? And Clara, with her tearful denials, was she complicit or coerced? Leaving Moretti to the police, Poirot and Hastings returned to the Langston mansion, where Evelyn awaited in the drawing-room, her black silk dress a stark contrast to her pale face.
The news of the fire had reached her, and her composure was fraying, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "Another tragedy?" she whispered, her eyes wide. "What does it mean, Monsieur Poirot?" Her voice trembled, but Poirot noted the absence of tears, the calculated tilt of her head. "Madame, its wax seal broken." "Poirot, look at this," he said, handing it over. The letter, in Evelyn's elegant handwriting, read, "E, we're exposed. Act fast. Signed, V.M." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mon Dieu, a conspiracy indeed. Madame Langston and Monsieur Moretti, united in fear." He turned to Evelyn, holding the letter aloft. "Explain this, madame. Why did Moretti warn you?" Evelyn's face drained of colour, her voice a whisper. I don't know what you mean. That's not mine." But her denial was weak, her eyes betraying panic. Poirot's mind churned, weaving connections. The cufflink, possibly Moretti's, planted to mislead. The key marked AL, unlocking forged bonds. The scarf linked to a woman's scream. The photograph of Clara with Langston, hinting at betrayal. Tom Riley's murder, silencing a witness. The hidden ledger, exposing fraud. And now the fire, destroying evidence. The note, "Debts are paid," suggested vengeance, but the bonds and manifest pointed to greed. Were Evelyn and Moretti partners, or pawns in a larger game? And where was Lionel Drake, whose absence screamed guilt? Poirot sought Clara Henshaw next, finding her at her apartment, her face etched with terror. "Mademoiselle," he began, showing her the manifest, "your initials appear alongside Madame Langston's and Monsieur Moretti's. Were you part of this fraud?" Clara's tears fell, her voice breaking. "I only did what Arthur asked. Typed his letters, kept his books. I didn't know they were forged." Her fear seemed genuine, but Poirot noted her hesitation when asked about Evelyn. "Mrs. Langston, she hated me," Clara admitted. "She thought I was too close to Arthur." The photograph, the initials, her late-night visit to the mansion all pointed to Clara's entanglement. But was she a victim or a conspirator? Inspector Callahan, joining them at the docks, had news. "Drake's still missing, but we found a witness who saw him arguing with Riley before the murder. Something about coming clean." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Something in the ashes," he said, holding up a charred key, identical to the one marked AL. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. Another key, or the same? The killer taunts us. The manifest, the letter, the fire, all pointed to a conspiracy unraveling, but the architect remained hidden. As they turned to leave, a woman's cry echoed from a nearby alley. "I can't lie anymore!" Poirot's cane froze, his eyes gleaming. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "Clara Henshaw, perhaps, breaks her silence. Or is it another trap?" The confession. The Brooklyn docks, steeped in the oppressive gloom of a November night in 1933, seemed to pulse with secrets, the air heavy with the lingering scent of smoke from Vincent Moretti's burned office. Hercule Poirot, his silhouette sharp against the flickering gas lamps, moved with the precision of a conductor, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the cobblestone pier. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, clutched his notebook, his face taut with anticipation. "That cry, Poirot," he whispered, gesturing toward the dark alley where a woman's voice had echoed, "I can't lie anymore." It's got to be Clara, breaking at last. Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray eyes gleaming with resolve. "Mon ami, confessions are like mirrors. They reflect truth. but sometimes distorted. Let us see who speaks. The alley, narrow and lined with crates, reeked of damp wood and decay. The cry had drawn a small crowd of dock workers, their lanterns casting wavering shadows. Poirot, undeterred by the darkness, led the way, his cane a beacon of purpose. At the alley's end, huddled against a wall, was Clara Henshaw, her prim gray dress torn at the hem, her face streaked with tears. Her hands clutched a crumpled note, and her eyes, wide with fear, met Poirot's. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You cried out. What truth can you no longer conceal?" Clara's breath hitched, her voice a trembling whisper. Clara shook her head, her voice firm despite her tears. "No, I told you I don't wear perfume." Poirot noted the conviction in her denial, but the scarf remained a puzzle, its jasmine scent a whisper of another's presence. He held up the note she clutched. "And this, mademoiselle, what is it?" Clara hesitated, then handed it over, her hands trembling. The note, in her handwriting, read, "I know everything. Meet me at midnight." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This is the same message found in Monsieur Langston's study. You wrote it, no?" Clara nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, but it wasn't about murder. I wanted him to confess about the bonds, to stop before it was too late. When I got to the docks, he was already dead." Her sobs echoed in the alley, and Poirot's gaze softened, though his mind remained relentless. Hastings, scribbling furiously, whispered, "She's telling the truth, Poirot. She loved him. Why would she kill him?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Love, mon ami, is a motive as powerful as hate. But Mademoiselle Henshaw's fear suggests she is a pawn, not a queen." He turned back to Clara. "Who else knew of your meeting at the docks?" Clara's eyes widened. "No one, or so I thought. But Evelyn, she suspected us. She hated me." Poirot's mind flashed to Evelyn Langston's cold composure, her quick deflection to Clara when questioned. Was Evelyn the architect of this tragedy, or another piece in the puzzle? Leaving Clara with a policeman for protection, Poirot and Hastings returned to the docks, where Inspector Callahan awaited with news. "Found a witness who saw Drake near the warehouse before Riley's murder," he said. "They were arguing, something about coming clean." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Drake, then, holds a key to this mystery. His vendetta against Langston, his connection to Riley, they are not coincidence." But Drake's absence gnawed at Poirot. Was he fleeing guilt or danger? The hidden ledger, still tucked under Poirot's arm, weighed heavily, its entries a map of Langston's fraud. The initials VM, CH, and EL linked Moretti to meeting Arthur, she said, her voice sharp. "She's the killer, then. She was obsessed with him." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Madame, obsession is a motive, but so is greed. Your initials, EL, appear in the ledger, tied to the forged bonds. Explain." Evelyn's face paled, her hand trembling. "That's impossible. I knew nothing of Arthur's business." But her eyes darted to the desk, where the hidden ledger had been found, and Poirot caught the flicker of fear. "And this letter," he said, producing the note signed VM, "suggests you and Monsieur Moretti were allies. Why did he warn you of exposure?" Evelyn's laugh was brittle, her voice rising. "You're mistaken, Monsieur Poirot. That letter is a forgery, meant to frame me." But her denial was weak, her hands shaking as she clutched her pearls. Hastings, less tactful, pressed forward. "Mrs. Langston, the evidence is piling up. The ledger, the letter, the bonds. You're in this, up to your neck." Evelyn's eyes flashed, her composure shattering. "How dare you? I am a widow,
grieving my husband."
But her voice cracked, and Poirot's suspicions deepened. The scarf, the initials, the letter, all pointed to Evelyn's involvement. But was she the killer, or a pawn manipulated by another? Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments. The cufflink, possibly Moretti's, was a red herring, planted to mislead. The key marked AL had unlocked the crate of forged bonds, tying Langston to the fraud. The scarf, with its jasmine scent, suggested a woman's presence, Evelyn or another. Clara's confession, heartfelt but incomplete, cast her as a victim of love, not a murderer. Riley's death silenced a witness, likely by Drake's hand, driven by vengeance for his brother's ruin. But the fire, the letter, the manifest, all pointed to Evelyn and Moretti as architects of a larger scheme. Returning to the docks, Poirot sought Moretti, whose office was now a charred ruin. Moretti, his scar livid in the fire. Someone weaves a clever web. Cliffhanger. As they turned to leave, a dock worker's shout pierced the dawn. "Found the dagger, hidden in the crates!" Poirot's cane froze, his eyes gleaming. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "The weapon returns, and with it, the killer's mask slips." Chapter 10. The Final Deduction. The Langston Mansion, its limestone facade glowing faintly under the pale dawn of a November morning in 1933, stood as a silent witness to the unraveling of a deadly conspiracy. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat impeccable despite the long night, gathered the players in the grand drawing room, where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across mahogany and velvet. His cane tapped a deliberate rhythm on the marble floor, a metronome to his thoughts. Captain Hastings, at his side, clutched his notebook, his face taut with anticipation. "This is it, Poirot," he whispered. "You've got them all here. Evelyn, Moretti, Clara, even Drake. The truth comes out now." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray eyes gleaming with resolve. "Mon ami, the truth has always been here, hidden in the details. Hercule Poirot shall reveal it." The room was charged with tension. Evelyn Langston, in black silk, stood by the fireplace, her composure a fragile mask, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace. Vincent Moretti, his scar livid in the morning light, leaned against a wall, his eyes defiant but uneasy. Clara Henshaw, pale and trembling, sat on a velvet settee, her hands clasped tightly. Lionel Drake, tracked down at last in a dockside tavern, slouched in a chair, his weathered face etched with resentment. Inspector Callahan stood by the door, his presence a reminder of the law's looming judgment. The air was thick with expectation, as if the mansion itself awaited Poirot's verdict. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. "A crime has been committed, 2 crimes, in fact. Arthur Langston, a man of wealth and secrets, was stabbed at the... Such a calling card, unless they wish to mislead." Moretti's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Poirot continued, holding up the key marked AL. "This unlocked a crate of forged bonds, linking Langston to a fraud of millions. But who placed it there?" He turned to the jasmine-scented scarf. "This, found near a blood-smeared crate, pointed to a woman's presence. Yet neither Madame Langston nor Mademoiselle Henshaw claims it." Poirot's gaze swept the room, his voice rising. "The hidden ledger, the singed manifest, the letter signed VM warning E, we're exposed, all reveal a conspiracy. Langston and Moretti were partners in forging bonds, a scheme to amass wealth through deceit. But greed breeds betrayal, and betrayal breeds murder. He turned to Evelyn. Madame, your initials, E.L., appear in the ledger. You were not ignorant of your husband's dealings, no? You stood to inherit millions, but only if his secrets remained buried. Evelyn's face paled, her voice trembling. You're wrong. I knew nothing. But her eyes darted, betraying panic. Poirot pressed forward, producing the letter. This, in your handwriting, matches the note pinned to Langston's body. Debts are paid. You wrote it, madame, to disguise your motive as vengeance, when it was greed. Evelyn's composure shattered, her hands shaking. No, I loved Arthur. But her denial was weak, her eyes filled with fear. Poirot turned to Moretti. Monsieur, you warned Madame Langston of exposure, for you were complicit. The fire in your office was meant to destroy evidence, but the manifest survived, bearing your signature. You planted the cufflink to mislead, but your panic betrayed you. Moretti's scar twitched, his voice a growl. You've got nothing, Poirot. Langston was the mastermind. But his hands fidgeted, and Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. To Clara, Poirot's tone softened. Mademoiselle Henshaw, you loved Langston, and he used you. You typed his letters, kept his books, unaware of the fraud until it was too late. Your nose,
fearing exposure of their fraud, stabbed him, planting the cufflink to mislead. The scarf, a gift from Moretti to Evelyn, was left to implicate another. Riley's murder was Drake's act, a desperate attempt to protect his own secrets. The fire was their final gambit, but it failed. Evelyn lunged forward, a hidden dagger gleaming in her hand, her face twisted with rage. "You'll never prove it!" she cried. But Hastings, quick on his feet, restrained her, wrestling the weapon away. Moretti bolted for the door, but Callahan's men blocked him, handcuffs snapping shut. Drake, defeated, slumped in his chair, his confession sealing his fate. Clara, weeping, was led away for her own protection. Poirot adjusted his hat, his voice calm, but triumphant. Mon Dieu, greed is a poor master. The little grey cells have prevailed, and order is restored. The room fell silent, the weight of justice settling like dust. The docks, once a stage for murder, would whisper no more secrets. Langston's empire, built on lies, had crumbled, and his killers faced their reckoning. As the police led Evelyn and Moretti away, Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes twinkling. A complex puzzle, mon ami, but no match for Hercule Poirot. Hastings nodded, his admiration clear. You've done it again, Poirot. But that scarf, whose was it really? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A detail, Hastings, solved in the mind. Evelyn's denial was her final lie. The mansion's grandeur seemed diminished, its opulence tainted by betrayal. Poirot and Hastings stepped into the dawn, the air crisp with the promise of a new day. The docks, now silent, held no more mysteries. Poirot's thoughts turned to London, where his next case awaited. Come, Hastings, he said, his cane tapping the cobblestones. The world requires order, and we shall provide it. The resolution was complete, but Poirot's mind lingered on the details, the cufflink, the key, the scarf, the ledger, the file.